to all. For those following us from outside, a very short introduction. And I'm a researcher at the Heritage Science Institute of the Consiglio Nazionale delle Ricerche and specialized in Near Eastern archaeology and Phoenician archaeology. And I've been working in Syria at Tel Afis and Tel Kazel, in Lebanon and Sardinia. And as a co-organizer of this meeting, I thank you all for your presence and participation in these 2 days. The main aim of my paper is to highlight the elements of innovation in the amphora repertoire between the Late Bronze and Iron Age. So I will present an overview of chronological issues, of main approaches in the study of storagers of the early Iron Age. Then I'll discuss the main transformation in some of the main transformation in the repertoire, starting from the Northern Levant and with a few examples from the Southern Levant, and concluding with the issues related to the circulation of amphorae in the early Iron Age. So starting the transitional phase between the Late Bronze and Iron Age in the Levant is obviously at the center of a 20-year debate on chronology. And this transition also has many economic, political, social, and cultural connotation. Some scholars have emphasized the factors of crisis, transformation, change, and disruption, but others emphasize the elements of continuity also. Some have stressed ethnic and identity matters, the advent of new peoples, and others have highlighted social and economic patterns. Recent excavations in the Southern Levant have enabled researchers to assume a slow and progressive changeover with a gradual decline of the canonized cities. And the case of Megiddo is a good example. At least 3 moments of disturbance have been identified by the excavators in recent years. The first in early 12th century BC, the second at the end of the 12th century, and the third one in mid-11th century. At the 12th century Megiddo, material culture appears to be in close continuity with the Late Bronze Age. So this phase is referred to as Late Bronze III. Only from the 11th century, according to Finkelstein, material culture can be considered indicative of the early Iron Age. In the Northern Levant, on the other hand, the crisis of the coastal urban culture is more clearly perceptible from the first decades of the 12th century. An international center such as Ugarit is completely destroyed within the first 2 decades of the 12th century, and the disappearance of this crucial node along the Syrian coast contributes to the decline of the trade network. On the other hand, other smaller urban centers continue to be inhabited, such as Tel Kazel in the Akkar Plain, where researches have been led by Leila Badr. At Kazel, an increase in the number of storage jars in area 2 and 4 is perceptible in phase K1, the phase in which the handmade varnish ware appears, for example, the phase of transition. This numerical increase allows us to assume a need for storage, a sort of need to ensure supplies, perhaps in connection with and in reaction to the international crisis. On the background of this transformation with destructions, decline, but also continuity and reaction to the crisis, what innovations are taking place in the amphora repertoire, and what approaches were adopted in the study of amphora of this period? Although at first sight, the transformation in the shape of an amphora seems less relevant than other type of cultural innovation, such as the emergence of alphabetic writing, the subject of a previous meeting of our PRIN. However, behind the adoption of new ceramic forms or new technological aspects, as Idris showed well a few minutes ago, we can identify and recognize specific needs and new demands. In the Levant, storage jars have been usually considered as a chronological marker. The morphology of the rims was used as chronological indicator, but it is clear, at least for the early Iron Age, this is sure, that rims alone do not provide valid chronological patterns outside of a single site or a micro-region analysis. For the past 40 years, going beyond the chronotypological approach, storage jars have also been studied from a multifaceted perspective. Stoppers and sealing methods, clay analysis, capacity measurements, and morpho-functional features have been taken into account. It is not just a question of adding information, but of switching the perspective. How should the amphora repertoire be studied? A vessel has to be studied as such in its intrinsic reality. Bearing this in mind, we can now just overview a few examples of transformations in the repertoire starting from the northern Levant. Two key aspects must be considered as a priority: the technological and productive aspects and the functional aspects. These fields are strictly connected since manufacturing processes condition the morpho-functional characteristic, and at the same time, new functional needs can induce a transformation of the manufacturing processes. Through shaping, specific morpho-functional elements can be intentionally realized, and I have observed some of these elements firsthand in the amphora of Tel Kazel. As Idris already showed in the late Bronze II commercial amphora, it was my type 5-4, the angular shoulder provides an increased resistance to mechanical shocks. The protruding stump bases represent a new device that makes it possible to rotate the container by pivoting on the base. The angular shoulder amphora is used in the maritime trade during the late Bronze II. In the Iron Age, this amphora is no longer being produced as a result of the collapse of the international trade network and disappears completely. In the late Bronze II and early Iron periods, also a different type of base, the bulbous or bottom-like bases, is attested, especially in the bellied amphora. This is from Tel Kazel. The bellied amphora is found in the northern coastal Levant, with many examples at Tel Kazel. These amphora, that I call type 4-2 and 4-1, appear to have been produced for domestic storage or transport over short and medium distances. At Kazel, these amphorae were found in almost every room excavated in areas 2 and 4, in phases K2 and K1. The bellied amphora, however, definitely traveled by sea, as it is documented in Cyprus, especially in Ma Paleocastro, and even reached Egypt. Indeed, a complete vessel comes from Zawiyat Racham in Egypt. However, from a morphological point of view, it does not seem a type made expressly for maritime trade. In the K2 phase at Kazel, corresponding to late Bronze II, the inner wall, the bulbous bases, become thinner as a potter attempts to create a sort of inner hollow, which may also serve for the deposit of solid residues contained in the liquid or semi-fluid commodities. During the transition to the K1 phase, the transitional late Bronze Iron phase, bases also show finger traces as the potter added a layer of reinforcing clay inside. This K1 phase is the transitional one, and in Kazel, some innovation in material culture take place just in this phase. For example, the handmade varnish ware appears, which is a potential evidence of external elements. At Tel Kazel, in the transitional phase K1, a further element of maybe innovation in jars can be detected. an increase in attestation of potter's marks on handles. The mark is generally engraved before firing, sometimes it is impressed, more occasionally scratched after firing. The prevailing symbols are the cross, a kind of letter H, and the horizontal dashes. As for the rim morphology, in the sequence of Kazel, it is possible to note a shift from the thickened or folded rims of the key 3 and key 2 phases, the table to the late Bronze II, to the plain and straight rims of the transitional phase key 1, which in several cases also acquire a slightly inflected form. Some of these morpho-functional elements are also found in the southern Levant. The coastal strip stretching roughly from Sidon to Gaza corresponds to what we refer to as the southern Levant, and several sites have yielded storage jars from the transitional and early Iron Age phases. At Tel Gengim, in the municipality of Karaib, excavation conducted by Ida Ojano of our Heritage Science Institute and Wissam Khalil of the Lebanese University have uncovered many fragments of jars of many periods in a cistern, and a few rims can be dated to the transitional late Bronze II Iron I period. Straight and short necks are typical of the period. An inward thickened rounded rim, as in this example, seems to appear in the transitional phase as at Tel Kazel. We see the example from Tel Kazel also. Another fragment shows a more marked transition between the short straight neck and the shoulder. Without a complete body profile, it is impossible to assign these rims to a singular specific type. In this case, it is possible that the type attested is the conical cylindrical jar that I called the type 5-5, of which many examples are found at Tel KEISAN, especially in levels 9 AB, as we see now. In fact, in the southern Levant, the amphora repertoire of the transitional period and of the early Iron Age is characterized by the occurrence of jars with a conical cylindrical profile and slightly carinated shoulder. At Tel KEISAN in Galilee, this type is well attested both in levels 9C and 9AB. Level 9AB is probably contemporary with stratum 6A at Megiddo, and according to Ayel Gilboa, corresponding to Iron 1B, the end of 11th century. These jars with a slight carination on shoulder of the early Iron Age have a capacity of between 15 and 20 liters, with rarer examples reaching 30 liters. In this period, the creation of the standard form with precise morphological features and constant dimensions does not seem to be a concern. This is a point of difference from the late Bronze II phase, when the commercial amphora was more standardized in shape and size. However, at KEISAN, one can discern a gradual evolution from the early amphora of level 9C with a wider shoulder and a higher neck to the late early Iron Age specimens of level 9AB with a shorter shoulder and an almost standard shape. At KEISAN, amphorae with carinated shoulder were coexisting in the same context, in the same storage rooms, where ovoid amphorae, my type 9-2, having an elongated profile, a typical early Iron Age form, widespread in Galilee, in the Jezreel Valley, KEISAN, Bet Shan level 6, Yokneam level 17, and Megiddo. And at Megiddo, the oval amphora is known in stratum 6A of old excavation and in key 6 of new excavation. This is the so-called late Bronze free phase of Megiddo, a period ending in a destruction at the end of the 12th, beginning of the 11th century. In the final phase of the early Iron Age, amphora Amphorae with slightly carinated shoulders and conical cylindrical bodies are also tested in the Philistine region. At Kazel, bases are more rounded, unlike the KEISAN's bulbous bases. About 80 carinated jars were discovered in a small space in building the residency. At Tel Mikne Ekron, an inland Philistine town, the type referred to as ovoid seems to me relevant to the cylindrical jar with slightly carinated shoulder. So the same type 5-5. In the pillared court, however, an Egyptian amphora was found along with the local amphora of the special type with a furred handle on the neck and a pouring spout. This is a kind of jar jug attested at sites in the highlands, for example, Montebal and Shiloh in the Iron One. These are special amphorae whose use is perhaps related to practices that are not necessarily daily and ordinary. On the other hand, jars with carinated shoulder are used for food storage. Storing food supplies within a few small storage rooms seems to be the primary early Iron Age need, as we have already seen in Syria and in Galilee. Beyond their primary storage functions, these Iron Age amphorae could also have circulated regionally or extra-regionally. Provenance studies based on clay analysis can suggest patterns of circulation. Petrographic analyses have been mainly carried out on amphorae coming from the southern Levant. A diachronic picture that emerged from studies by Goren, by Ayele Gilboa and Paula Weiman shows that in the late Bronze two main regions shipped jars, coastal Syria, namely Ugarit at the center of this region, and the Carmel coast, as documented by the Uluburun and Komos jars analyzed by Goren. In the 12th century, the collapse of coastal Syria is noteworthy, and the petrofabrics refer to the Carmel region, Sharon Plain in southern Levant. In the mid-9th century, the Levantine amphorae found in Cyprus still point to the Carmel coast, but also to the southern Lebanese coast as main areas of origin, whereas coastal Syria and northern Lebanon are not represented in the petrographic classes. Finally, analysis by Paula Weiman and Gilboa of the amphorae found in Komos in Crete in the 9th and 8th centuries show a full centrality of southern Lebanon and the disappearance of the area between Carmel and Sharon. This picture, which shows changes, transformation, decline, and rise of some areas of production, should be completed with further analysis of the amphorae of the northern Levant. Especially, it could be useful to have analysis of amphorae from Tel Kazel, where in the 12th century, numerous amphorae are produced and used, and very similar in shape to those of Ma Paleocastro in Cyprus. Even the less frequent typologies attested in Kazel, such as this ellipsoid-shaped one, find comparison in Cyprus, as attested by this vessel from Hala Sultan Tekke, found in a 12th century context. Rather than proposing conclusions, we can at this point suggest some food for thought. Levantine amphorae between the 12th and 10th centuries are characterized by substantial continuity in basic shapes. At the same time, certain transformations in the morphology allow us to suggest a few changes in function, use, circulation. Bulbous or bottom-like bases gradually appear and become used, often with an internal cavity. The rims become shorter and straighter, requiring different sealing methods than the previous late Bronze Age jar stoppers found, for example, at Deir el Medina for the late Bronze II. There is no longer any interest in the standardization of capacities, and jars seem to be mainly used for food storage, but at the same time, there is evidence of their circulation. The existing data suggest that the Syrian coast, immediately after the collapse of the Lebanon's two coastal centers, no longer regains a role as a production area for storage jars traveling by sea. But this picture, in my opinion, still needs to be better clarified, as at least in terms of morphology, the 12th century Levantine amphorae from Cyprus quite clearly refer to models from the northern Levant, which are widely attested at Kazel. So while crises of the past may have resulted in the decline of an area of production of amphorae for maritime transport, maybe crises of the present can also lead to documentary imbalances. And we must even necessarily reckon with these present-day imbalances. So I thank you very much for your attention.